So thank you for bearing with us for the whole day. National Saturdays usually clash with the Six Nations Rugby, but today is the Wimbledon Ladies Final, so we won't keep you long, particularly for those tennis fans. So for the next 10 minutes or so, I'm just going to recap on the very rich discussions that we've had today, and it'll be a final opportunity for you as well to ask any questions that you have regarding the assignment. So we started off this morning with Laura focusing on part 2 of the assignment and sharing some very, very valuable guidance with you regarding how to structure and present your video. She talked about the need for critical analysis, and I'll come to that later on. Critical analysis, critical reflection on your findings from the audit. She referred to Gallo's guidance on being understandable, memorable and emotional. And I think that's very, very good advice when you go about structuring your assignment. And what was very useful as well was the 3-step framework that she shared regarding having a beginning, a middle and an end. Tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and finally tell them what you have told them. So go back to the recording, which will be up on PebblePad next week, of Laura's session before starting on your assignment. I think it'll be very useful for you. And then we moved on to course stand 3. And Anne kicked that off with talking about the importance of shared responsibility when it comes to collaboration and multi-agency working, and that coordinated support that should be at the heart of all ALN provision. And this was also reinforced by our expert, Professor Jonathan Glaser, in the following session. And what's interesting is that some of the key points that he raised, which I'll elaborate on later on, are key points that have been raised within your discussions and within the presentations today. There are golden threads running through the whole day regarding some of the key messages. So discussions identified in course strand 3 some of the challenges involved here regarding resources, different systems used by different stakeholders, parental engagement, etc. Cluster working was also discussed, and the challenges of agreeing on a shared goal. Distributed leadership and the need to develop leadership across all parts of the system, while also acknowledging that not all of us want to be a leader. So the barriers and challenges for the Elenco were also identified in looking at things through the distributed leadership lens. And then Di built on the material from the leading and management of ALN module and looked at the functions of the Elenco, the skills, the attitudes, the expertise needed. And issues that you identified were things like empathy, understanding, assertiveness, knowledge, time management. So these skills, these values are also needed for every classroom teacher in order to ensure inclusive practice. Understanding and interpretation of inclusion was also a key issue highlighted here. Highlighted again by Jonathan Glaser in the Ask the Expert. So the sharing of effective practice was discussed, and Di referred back then to our expert panel in the first National Saturday. And Jean Ware's comment of what do we actually mean by excellence? What are we looking for? And that may be a good question when you are doing your audit. What exactly are you looking for when you are looking at that practice? Is it learner engagement and voice, as Jean Ware identified, or is it something else? The significance then of evidence-informed practice was also highlighted, and the significance of the context in which that evaluation of practice is being done. And then we moved on to the Ask the Expert and Professor Jonathan Glaser from Edge Hill. I've read a lot of his work, I've cited a lot of his work when I'm writing. So I was really looking forward to this session, and I really enjoyed that session because he covered so many aspects. I don't know how he managed to cram all those important messages into such a short space of time. But that shows, you know, why he is the expert, or one of the experts in the field. I've highlighted some of his key messages in the next slide, but as I said, his key messages have also resonated in some of our discussions today. And then finally, in this afternoon, we looked at core strand 4, and Carmel looked at the theory surrounding the skills needed to challenge stakeholders to implement a change of values, beliefs, and culture, and getting yourself and others to work in different ways, sometimes working in an uncomfortable space. And you need to work in an uncomfortable space in order to move forward. And she also a few times mentioned, you know, how we need to work with complexity at times in order to move forward with our practice. She introduced the inclusive pedagogical approach in action by Florian, which is a very useful framework for inclusion. You know, and those more open-ended expectations and more creative approach, which actually reinforces Jonathan Glaser's recommendation of adaptive teaching. At the end, you also looked at the professional standards, collaboration and innovation, which supports that creative approach that I mentioned earlier. So moving forward then, Jonathan Glaser's main messages, there were lots of messages, but these are just the ones that I have highlighted. He talked about the importance of language, and what was reassuring for me, he started off by saying that additional learning needs is a much more inclusive term than special educational needs. And I thought, well, that's reassuring for us in Wales to hear that we've got rid of the word special and that term. I thought his points on the use of terminology was very important, and maybe that is a top tip for you when you come to write your assignments as well. You know, think of the terminology that you use. You know, maybe rather than use the words, he said suffers, doesn't he, experiences, use the word experience instead. You know, that's good advice when it comes to writing. I'm not a fan of the word difficulties. I rather challenges, because challenges, you can overcome challenges. Difficulties has a more negative connotation. So be aware of the terminology that you use in your writing when you are referring to the different aspects of provision. And remember what Jonathan said about that use of language and use of terminology.
Anna,
yeah?
Chi'n rhannu'r slides, ni ond yn gallu gweld y slides cynta.
Oh, fi wedi symud mlaen. Sorry. A fe'n dangos y sleid gywir gyda fi. Dwi'm yn gwybod beth sydd wedi digwydd.
Mae ond yn dangos y sleid cynta i ni.
Na i geisio ail rannu.
I think I'm right. And nobody else, is everybody else only seeing the first slide?
Yeah, just the first one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was me, but
I'll stop sharing and try again. Can you see the Jonathan Glaser slide now?
No.
It tells me that I'm screen sharing, so I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
if you want to send it to one of us and we'll try it.
I'll do that now. Sorry about that.
There, now.
Oh, now we can see it.
Now we can see it.
Ah, right, okay. I'll try. If I go to the next slide, can you tell me whether you can see the next slide, which is the next steps?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine, okay. Sorry about that. What I had on the previous slides was basically what the core strand is for core strand 3 and what we did during the morning and during the afternoon. So you haven't missed a lot with regards to slides, and they will be shared on PebblePad early next week. So right, back to this slide. Yes, I've talked about language and terminology that Jonathan Glaser talked about, and then he talked about the socially constructed norms and the fact that we as a society set the norms, and if children and young people and even adults don't meet those, then they get labelled. He talked about the ableist society that we live in and our neoliberal education system that focuses on standards and achievement. He called for a change in the education system, a change of curriculum that focuses on disability, the need to focus on disability, and different assessment procedures that are inclusive to achievement in different ways. And at the end of her presentation there, Carmel mentioned the 4 purposes. Well, my question is, will the progression steps in Curriculum for Wales achieve this for us? Time will tell. To what extent is teaching about disability included within our Curriculum for Wales as well? So maybe those are things that we need to consider in moving forward. He talked about excellence in teaching, where adaptive teaching, where things that you've already mentioned, learning with peers and learning with the teachers rather than the TAs. He mentioned, that the TAs had a significant part to play in learners' development, but that they need to be taught by the teachers as well. Effective partnerships, the voice of the learner, which we talked quite a lot about in the first National Saturday. And then the need for evaluating excellence and developing an approach that is based on strengths, a strengths-based approach, rather than looking at the deficits, focusing on the strengths. And he also identified some of the challenges, and these are challenges that you've already identified within your own settings. And in Wales in general, things like the availability of resources, and those of you that are working in Welsh medium settings, what about the availability of Welsh medium resources, whether that be human resources or supporting resources or assessment resources? Training was mentioned, funding, ITE provision. And I've worked for a number of years in ITE, but we are restricted with what experiences our student teachers can have in specialist provision. So again, it needs a change of policy, and that is political. The challenges of sharing of information was also mentioned, sharing information with different stakeholders and the way that different stakeholders share information with us. In moving forward, he mentioned that it was key to have that vision of where you want to be, and that long-term vision where you identify strategies and identify an action plan. And he did mention, didn't he, that we should identify 3 or 4 small targets to work towards rather than looking at the bigger picture. And then an important aspect of his own practice that he shared with us was the research-informed practice that he had undertaken in his schools. Maybe we have that in Wales with our NPEP project, but maybe this is something that we need to develop further within our settings. And then finally, the importance of collaboration. So that was his presentation. Now, what are the next steps for you? Well, I would suggest these next steps. There will be optional sessions within your individual HEIs. Please engage with this, because this is your opportunity to ask any questions and maybe to discuss anything that you haven't had an opportunity to discuss during today or that you're unclear about. It will be the end of term next week, I think, for maybe all of you. So just make sure that you have all the evidence that you need from your setting to help you with your assignment. you will need this in order to complete the assignment. If you don't have it now, then, you know, make sure it's a point of urgency for the next week. Then revisit the resources on PebblePad. That's where you will get a lot of research articles that we've shared with you. And also look at the research articles and follow up on some of the articles cited within the reference list of those, you know, as additional reading. And then finally, to complete the assignment and submit by the 30th of August, which is the deadline. PebblePad, the material from today is under the resources tab, National Saturday 2, and everything that you will need regards the guidance for the assessment is under assessment documents, and I've color coded them there for you in green and yellow. The assignment, I know Rhiannon went through the first part in detail with you in National Saturday 1, and Laura went through it in detail with you in earlier this morning. So I will just jump forward to, are there any questions regarding the assignment that you've thought about during the day?
Yeah, Nana, can I ask? Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay, go on.
When will the assignment sort of, you know, how do we turn it in? Go up. I'm just conscious that some people, including myself, are away so towards the end of August, so may want to submit an assignment, you know, a week or two before the deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know what date the turn it in
That will be up to individual HEIs. I know from our perspective at UWTSD, turn it in is already open.
Oh, okay. Brilliant, thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, I'm still a bit confused about the audit. Like you just said, if we need any information from school, we need to get it now because we've only got 3.5 days left, or 4 days. I don't understand it at all, and I have asked Laura about it, but I'm still a bit confused about how we do that audit.
Okay, I'll go back to this slide then. So the audit is looking at, you have a template, don't you? I know Rhiannon explained this in the first National Saturday, and a template has been shared with you regarding how you can gather that information.
I've used all that and I've read everything, and I went to the Saturday and I went to the other session we had, but I still don't understand how we do the audit, actually do the audit. I've got the template and everything. I just don't understand what information you want us to use from school and how much is from our knowledge. That's what I don't understand. I just haven't got my head around it. How, you know, how much do you actually need from the professionals in the school, because it's really hard to get it at, you know, the end of the year, get any information from anyone. It's really hard.
What information were you looking for?
That's what I'm asking you. I don't know what you want, you know, how much is it from the professionals in the place? How much is it my knowledge? Because we haven't got time to do a proper audit.
You need to identify what you're looking at as effective practice, and the guidance that you had, I think, is to look at no more than 3 aspects of effective practice.
I understand all that. I just don't,
right,
and I don't know how much you need us to get from other teachers, from the head teacher, from other professionals. When we're doing the assignment, how much are you expecting us to? It's just really hard this late in the year to get that information from all those teachers and professionals.
Yeah, your colleagues in school are just one source of information. Remember, you also have your school policies. You have maybe, I don't know, maybe you have evidence from performance management. It may be from observations. It depends on exactly what you're looking at, is what I'm trying to get at. Maybe it's a conversation you need with your tutor in your own HEI, Lucy.
Yeah, I did have that conversation. I'm just a bit confused about it. I still don't understand. And I have had that conversation. I've had it with my own tutor, and I've read through all the things again. I still don't understand it.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's my understanding.
I think Lucy, what it was is you thought you had to do like research into it, didn't you?
Yeah, but it's just with Nana.
You don't need to do any research or anything, because I know that's what you were concerned about.
Yeah,
that you thought you'd have to go out and actually do a research to find the information for your audit, but all you're doing really is looking at what is going on in your setting, really, identifying that as effective practice, and then you draw it from that, basically.
Yeah, it just confused me because Nana just said we need to get all that information from school before it closes, and I'm just panicking if I haven't got the right information from school before we close for summer. You know,
I think another point Lucy's trying to make, that we've had conversations about as well, as the concern, it's the last week of term, and if we're looking for effective practice, that's a lot of that is seeing others, going into other classrooms to see what's going on. Well, most classes at this time of year are in utter chaos, so it's very difficult to, if I'm looking at person-centered practice, oh, can I pop into your classroom this morning? There would be the backlash we'd get at this point in the year. It would be, hell no,
We're not asking you to do that, because if we were asking you to do that, you'd have to go through our ethics procedure in order to go and collect data. So we would see that as collecting data, and we're not asking.
But you're asking us to look at whole school.
Yeah, but
how can we look at whole school if we can't go in? If we can only know what's in our heads? I don't know what other classes do.
No, but as Nana was saying, you've got policies there as well, haven't you? So you can draw.
Do policies give us?
Well,
I'd argue that policies don't show us what's going on in the classroom. It's policies in a cupboard, but it's not necessarily reflected in classrooms. Because teachers are individuals. Well, I'm not trying to. This is why we're all so confused about what we're doing.
Which county are you?
Wrexham.
Because I know that in Carmarthenshire here, there's a really good, on Hub, on SharePoint, there's lots and lots of information from the county, all their kind of guidelines about the new transformation, and that's what they feed into schools. So if you've got anything like that in Wrexham, where the advisory teachers have worked on all that information from the ALN bill and the ALN transformation, and so put that guidance together for schools, that might be a good starting point, possibly. Just an idea.
It's just interpreting the instructions, I think, is what we're struggling with, because it's the interpretation that we're taking from it is look at the whole school setting of how effective practice is done, but it's physically we can't do that. Yeah, that is the interpretation of the instructions we're struggling with.
Yeah,
which is why we need clarification.
It comes from your perspective and where you come from. So if you go back to the guidance, the first 500 words is where you present your context. So you talk about what your role is within the school, and then you are identifying it. So it's from your perspective, but then you're drawing upon literature, etc., to support that. We're not asking you to go into classrooms to do observations or collect any data, but you've got school policy and guidance and information that you've had. Maybe you've had an Eston inspection, etc., so you can draw that information to support the audit.
And the focus, the things that you focus on within that audit will be shaped by the role that you have within the school. So if you're already in an Elenco role, you'll have a more strategic overview of what's in place in your school in general, and you'll be thinking about those bigger picture kind of strategic elements of ALN practice and reform. If you're a classroom teacher who's aspiring to be an Elenco, then you'll be reflecting on what you are aware of as a classroom teacher in your setting in terms of inclusive practice and school policy around inclusion, and we want your reflections on the areas that you think you're doing really well in, but also how those, you know, certain areas could be developed. So yeah, it's very, these reflections will be completely different depending on what role you have in your setting.
Yeah, because I'm not an ALN co or an aspiring ALN co. I work in my own bubble in resource provision, which is very different to the rest of the school. So to get a whole school perspective.
So you're in a specialist provision within a mainstream school.
Yeah.
So you can absolutely reflect on your inclusive practice and ALN practice within your resource base.
So just within the resource rather than the whole school.
Yeah.
That's because all the guidance keeps saying school, whole setting, rather than your classroom, which is why I think myself and Lucy and others we've discussed it in breakout rooms, we're all so confused.
I would hope
how on earth we're meant to do it.
Yeah, and I think some elements of it, some elements of your practice, your ALN practice, within your standalone kind of provision within your mainstream setting, will obviously be very particular and very specialist to your resource, your particular small resource. But I would hope that for any resource base, unit, special class, what, you know, there's various terminology, but I would hope for any specialist provision attached to a mainstream school that there are also links there with the mainstream ethos and practice and policies. So you would expect to see some form of thread there, some links to some of the policy and practice in the wider provision, rather than, you know, you being completely cut off and isolated and not at all part of that staff structure or policies or, you know, ethos of the whole school. So it will probably be a mixture of the two, but that's what the introduction is for, as Rhiannon said, to outline kind of your role and where you sit within your setting, and what you will therefore be reflecting on as a result of that.
Right. Okay.
And indeed, you could say that one of your targets or a way of, you know, part of your audit is that the good practice that goes on in your resource base ought to be reflected in the wider school. So you could use the setting as your resource base within the school.
No, it's not. But it could be happening already. I just don't know because I don't go to other people's classes.
Yeah,
it's that assumption.
That, yeah, it could,
we have to make a lot of assumptions.
Yeah. Well, I know.
But is that fair in the assignment to do that? Because I don't know.
But then is one of the things you need to reflect on within your assignment is that you need closer links with the practitioners across your setting, because you don't have the awareness as to whether or not practice.
No, there's plenty of close working going on, but I'm not in the classroom. I know please don't get me wrong, we work very collaboratively, but on a day-to-day, Lucy, I'm sorry, I'm hoping this is helping you as well, is that we are not physically there seeing it, but I know things go on. Yeah, but we have to get on with their own job.
Yeah. But I don't. So the reflections that we want you to give in this assessment aren't linked to go in and observe something and come back and write about it. It's about, if you've got that general awareness, if you've got those close links and you've got that knowledge of practice within your setting as a whole, then you can reflect on that in this audit. It doesn't need you to go in and carry out an observation and see it in practice. If you're aware that there's collaboration and sharing and there's, you know, then you can reflect on that.
Okay. No. How about this? Would you cut? Yeah.
Has that helped, Annabelle?
A little bit. I'm still. It's me. I'm just completely confused about it. Being an audit, but not collecting information from the people that.
Okay, I touched the.
That's what I'm confused
there's some background noise going on somewhere.
I don't know.
That will be for your research project next year, where you will have to go through the ethics procedure for any observations within classrooms. You'd have to have the ethics. So now you're reflecting, and what you've talked about now is some of the challenges that you're experiencing, and that might be what you are reflecting on within your assignment, within your audit, the challenges that you have identified. Okay, as time is moving on then, we kindly ask you to complete this evaluation for the module, and please reflect critically on the provision over the 2 Saturdays and what we've done, so that we can help in moving forward in planning this module next year. This is the first time that we've delivered this module, so we would be very, very grateful if you could access these forms and complete them for us, please. And then finally, there's a Padlet there. There's another link there to a Padlet where you, if you do have any questions following up from today, then can you please put them on that Padlet then, please? As I said, this presentation will be shared so you can access these following the session next week. And finally, I'd just like to thank you very, very much for your engagement with this module. Your discussions have been really, really interesting, and we as staff have benefited greatly from learning about what is going on within your different settings. So thank you, and please enjoy the holidays. So I'll just put the slide back now on the evaluation for you to complete, and then it's goodbye and thank you, and you're free to go watch the tennis, enjoy the sun. The sun is out here at the moment, so make the most of the weather if it's okay where you are. Felly diolch yn fawr i chi gyd, a phob hwyl am weddill yr haf.